You're watching Gearz, brought to you by Ram Truck.
You know, some of the most popular vehicles to hot rod right now are 80s and 90s cars and trucks because they're cheap, they're fairly easy to find, they have a huge aftermarket to support them, and they're not so old that you're going to have to do a complete restoration on them. Prime example is 1990 Mustang. As you can see, it's not only the rare notchback body style, but this is a former cop car, which means it's got a high-performance engine, Positrack rear end, 160-mile-an-hour speedometer, heavy-duty cooling system. Yeah, it's just like the Blues Brothers.
She complicated.
This car's got a lot of pickup. It's got a cop motor, a 440 cubic inch plant. It's got cop tires, cop suspension, cop shocks. It's a model made before catalytic converters, so it'll run good on regular gas.
Now, since most people in the 80s and 90s were into cruising and not high-performance driving, most 80s and 90s cars are missing a very important component. A clutch, a third pedal, a shifter. And one of the biggest questions we get is how do you convert an automatic car to a standard shift? Well, it's not that hard, and we're gonna prove it to you using this old Mustang. Okay, the first thing you need to do is gather the right parts, which means you need a pedal assembly. Fortunately, finding a pedal assembly for a Fox-bodied Mustang is fairly simple on eBay or at a salvage yard. We got these from State Line Auto Parts in Portland, Tennessee. Once we clean this up, it's gonna look like brand new. For everything else, we went to American Powertrain because they specialize in retrofitting 5- and 6-speed transmissions into whatever you're working on. And if you're gonna put a stick in something, you might as well put a big one in. So, we're gonna put this Tremec 6-speed into that Mustang because we want low-end grunt, we want high top end, and we want good fuel mileage, all wrapped into a fairly large package here. Of course, the kit comes with parts you expect, like an engine plate and a bell housing, a clutch fork and a throwout bearing, flywheel, and heavy-duty clutch and pressure plate. But it also comes with parts we tend to forget, like a clutch alignment tool, and a pilot bushing, and all the bolts to bolt everything together, and a high-performance shifter to make that Tremec really handle, and a clutch cable and quadrant so you can actually use the clutch. Also, don't forget, you need a special cross member to bolt everything in. If you forget any of this stuff, your leisurely weekend install just turned into a nightmare. American Powertrain is here to make sure that that doesn't happen. Okay, the first step is to get the old automatic transmission out, and that means pulling out the console and shifter, then getting the old exhaust system out of the way. Obviously, if you want to reuse it, you don't want to use a Sawzall to take it out. Come on down. Finally, pull out the drive shaft and cut or disconnect any other lines or components that might be in the way, or connect the transmission to the car. Now, just unbolt the transmission and lower it out of the car.
Now, quick tip. Brought to you by E13 Spark Plugs, born to burn.
You know, one of the biggest things that gets overlooked when you're pulling an automatic transmission out of a vehicle is that when you pull the drive shaft out, fluid is going to go everywhere. Now, of course, there's caps available to help you cap everything up, but not everybody's got these caps. So a simple alternative is to take a plastic bag or a plastic glove, and then when you pull the drive shaft out, put the glove around the tail snout of the transmission and then seal it up with some duct tape. The glove will capture the fluid so you don't end up wearing it or stumbling around in it for the rest of the project. Now, obviously, this is a temporary solution so you can get the transmission out, then you can plug it properly. If you'd like to learn more tips to make your life easier in the shop, check out the tips page on the website. Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where we are in the process of dumping this automatic transmission out of this old Foxbody Mustang and sticking in a Tremec 6-speed, because this is one of the most popular modifications that people like to do to cars and trucks and muscle cars and hot rods. And we're getting a ton of questions on how to do this swap. So that's what we're doing. Now, once you have all the old junk out of the way, it's time to fit the new stuff. And I say fit because it's up to you to get it in place and see if there's any clearance issues in the floor or the transmission tunnel. And if there are, it's up to you to fix them. On the Fox Mustang, about the only modification required is a tiny bit of trimming on one side of the shifter hole. Now you're ready to start assembling things like the pilot bushing, the motor plate and flywheel, follow that up with the clutch assembly and the pressure plate, using the clutch alignment tool that comes in the kit. Finally, slide the bell housing in place and bolt it on. The next thing to go in is the transmission. But before you hoist this big old boy up in there, you want to make sure you got everything installed on it, like your clutch fork and your throwout bearing, your transmission mount, and whatever you're going to do with the shifter. Now, like I said before, we're going to use this white lightning shifter from American Powertrain because it's going to give us much quicker, firmer shifts. At this point, you're ready to bolt the transmission in place using the supplied crossmember. Okay, the last thing you need to do is modify the pedals so you can actually control the clutch. So we're going to take our junkyard pedal assembly that's all cleaned up and painted, and we are not going to install all this broken plastic junk. Instead, we're going to put on this aluminum quadrant that comes with the kit. Then we're going to take this pedal assembly and swap it out for the one that's in the car. Now, this is a direct replacement, so there's no tricks here other than just getting your big body underneath the dash.
You sucker! Come out of there!
With that done, run the clutch cable, install the shifter handle and the boot to seal the hole, and that's about all there is to swapping a stick into a Mustang. Now, you will have to have a new drive shaft made because a stock one's not going to fit. You'll also need a new exhaust system built to go around the transmission. But the first time you grab that shifter, slam it into gear, pop that clutch and squeal those tires, you're going to know you did the right thing getting rid of this. You know, a while back, we started a project called the V8 Interceptor, where we took a mild-mannered 67 Mercury Cougar that was lady-owned all of its life and began to transform it into a wild street machine that somebody like Mad Max would want to drive. The entire front suspension was cut out. And a high-performance suspension from Total Cost Involved was installed to not only make the car handle better, but also make some room for some serious horsepower. The rear got the same treatment, with link suspension, big brakes, and a built 9-inch Ford rear end. Finally, a massive 780 horsepower Boss 9 engine was shoehorned into place. Stop. How you on the motor mount? I'm right on line. Along with a Tremec 6-speed transmission. From there, it was time for paint and body work. And obviously, we want the paint to be as unique as the rest of the car. So we hooked up with Doug LaRue at the Hot Rod Institute to see if he and the students wanted to take a crack at it. They did. So I quickly outlined with Doug what I wanted them to do. Build it right into the rocker panel, and then you do a nice slash cut here to where it exited right here by the tire. You could probably work it in with that fender flare a little bit. However you want to skin the roof. You know, I don't know if you want to come into the quarters, do that and just take the skin, use the inner structure on this one. You got a lot of options.
Yeah, we'll probably go ahead and cut the skin off and see what our inner structure looks like. And if it's rusty in there, then we'll just replace the whole thing.
Fender flares. You've already got a natural flare happening here. I've never really liked the fact that the Cougar's bent back this direction anyway. It's always hard to get a fat tire into there without rubbing. So if you could come out probably another couple inches and drop to where you're about there. But what I'm thinking, if you can take some like 2-inch tubing, you know, run it behind this cowl, you know, and weld it in there, weld it into the cowl there, and then bring a piece out here. It just drops right down, goes to the frame. See, there it is on factory holes. You're so close. If you just come over and make the major hole that one, you're clear. And if you come over just a hair further, I actually would have room to put a little booster in there. Then we loaded it up and sent it to South Dakota for the work to begin. Now, you might be wondering what the difference is between the Hot Rod Institute and all the other tech schools out there. The biggest difference is in the attention to detail that they teach the students. They want to build craftsmen here, not just people that know how to put a car together and get it out the door. Chassis, suspension, drivetrain, interior, it's all covered at the Hot Rod Institute.
We look for students that know what direction they want to go into. If they want to go into working on older cars, rebuilding a muscle car, building a hot rod from scratch, building a motorcycle from scratch, and they want those real hands-on type skills, that's the type of student we're looking for.
Getting your hands dirty right from the start is what I think is the coolest part about this school, and it's literally whatever you can think up here, they'll help you figure out a way to build it and build it right and build it safe.
We grade on classroom testing, which it's good to know it in theory. But when it comes to the shop, it's what they get done and what they get done correctly. If they work at something and it's not right, well then you can't hardly get credit for it. It's just like the real world. You don't get paid unless you do it right.
With the students helping wherever they could, Doug, his son Danny, and the instructors dove into the Cougar body and the long list I gave them to get it ready for paint. The whole roof was replaced, as well as any rust in the quarters of the floor. A cage was constructed to support the cowl and to tie into the frame rails. Then it was all hidden behind a smooth firewall. The side exhaust system exits over the top of the frame rails by running under the seat pedestals. The rockers were cut away, and the side pipes sunk into the rockers to literally make them part of the car. The hood was cut to allow the 8-stack injection to poke through, and the stacks on the ejection were cut down to match the rake of the car. And with the body getting closer to paint each day, The Cougar has made a great training tool to teach the students the high level of workmanship that's going to be expected of them once they graduate.
We're training our guys to go to work in some of the top shops in the nation.
And this industry is always looking for craftsmen who have a high standard of excellence and a great work ethic.
You know, I want to build awesome cars, but more I want to respect what's come before me and be a craftsman and a tradesman and do it how they used to do it, because to me it's a dying art, it's a dying breed, and without people like this at this school, you know, it's going to disappear in the next couple of years.
You know, one thing that we get a lot of questions about is insurance for classic cars or project cars. Things like, do I need insurance? How much insurance do I need? When do I need insurance? What happens if I wreck the car? What if the value of the vehicle changes? I mean, these are all great questions. But if you take those questions to 5 different insurance companies, you're going to get 5 different answers, because there's a big difference between auto insurance and classic car insurance. So we decided to go to the guys that actually came up with the idea of classic car insurance to see if we could get some straight answers and clear up some confusion. Collector car insurance was created in 1947 because Jim Grundy Sr. wanted to insure his father-in-law's collection of antique and classic cars.
My grandfather, surprisingly, is recognized as the first guy that ever restored a car. And the first car he had, he pulled out of a junkyard in 1936 and took it back to his factory where he restored the car. And that car, which I very fortunately was able to buy back a few years ago, is recognized by the Antique Automobile Club of America as the first car historically preserved. Granddad, being a savvy old businessman, said, "That'll be just fine, Sonny, but when you come up with a good product to insure these antique cars that I've spent a lot of money fixing up, and no insurance company will recognize it, and you can get me real low rates because they sit in the garage most of the time. When you give me that policy, you've got the company business."
Okay, the first big question that people have is, do I need to have insurance coverage on a car that I'm building? I mean, it doesn't really seem necessary. You're not driving it. I mean, what could happen, right? You might be surprised.
Homeowners insurance does not cover cars in your garage. And cars get stolen, houses catch fire. Every year we pay losses on fires in the garage. Component parts on some of these cars can cost $10,000 or $20,000. Engines more than that. That's all part of the car.
All right, let's say that you've got a car like this or that, and you don't want to just cruise it around all the time. You want to take that to a drag strip once in a while, or that to a road course. Or if you have an old Jeep or Bronco, you want to take it out on the trail and use it like it's supposed to be used. Does your classic car insurance cover that and the damage that can happen?
When our coverage stops is hot pit to hot pit. Once you put that fire suit on, put a helmet over your head, strap yourself in with a 5-point hitch, don't call us. But we do cover you in transit, we cover you in the paddock, we cover you for an accident driving out to the pits when people are wandering around. All that's covered. It's just hot pit to hot pit, no coverage. It's car guys servicing car guys. After all, that's what it's all about.
Well, hopefully this answers some questions that you may have had about insuring a classic vehicle, because unfortunately, accidents can happen, whether you're driving the vehicle or not. And when those accidents do happen, you don't want an insurance company that's going to fight with you and argue with you and kick you when you're down. No, you want a company that's going to help you back up. And Grundy Insurance has been doing that for a long time.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Air Raid, American-made quality and performance since 1992.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Robert Vaughn in Magnolia, Texas, and it outlines a very unique journey. Now, this journey started in 2009 when Robert and his 15-year-old son decided that they wanted to restore a car together for the son's 16th birthday. So they got on the internet, started looking at cars, and found a 1970 Camaro in Colorado. They had it shipped to Texas, and here's what they ended up with. Now, Robert was like, oh, what have I gotten myself into? The sisters nicknamed the car the Green Booger. Sisters. But the kid was ecstatic and immediately started tearing the car apart and doing a full restoration on it. Check it out. They stripped the car down to bare metal, had any rusty panels replaced at a nearby body shop. Then they bought their own spray gun and turned their garage into a paint booth and put on the Hugger orange paint, which effectively changed the name of the car. Now, Robert says that his son spent all summer on this thing, finished it in September, and then just a few days later, picking up his sister from school, totaled the car. Oh! And this is where Robert stepped in because he would not allow that insurance company to total this car. So they drug it back home, started building it again, and in a couple months, this is what rolled out. And most people can't believe it's the same car. Now, Robert says that this is the most beneficial time that he has ever spent with his son, and they've both matured immensely through this project. So, Robert, to recognize that, we hooked up with our buddies at Air Raid. We're gonna give you one of their air intake systems for whatever vehicle you need it for. All you do is go to their website, pick out the part number, and they'll send it to you. Also, we're gonna give you one of our project build books so you can keep track of that Camaro or whatever other project you're working on. Now, the rest of you guys, if you want to get your vehicle featured on the show, you got to submit it to what you're working on. We'll do our best to get it on the air. Also, don't forget, you got to smoke the tires on your hot rod at least once a day because it's good for the environment. We'll see you next week.